Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. And every Monday morning, I am joined by Sam Osterhout. He is our wonderful executive producer, and we go over the weekend's headlines and what you have to look forward to on Lincoln Square this week. So, Sam, we had another eventful weekend, and I thought we would just start with the fact that tomorrow the federal government is supposed to run out of money, and we could have a government shutdown. But if you looked at Hakeem Jeffries, Sunday show interviews, and if you know anything about Chuck Schumer, Rick Wilson's column on his own Substack, Rick Wilson's Against All Enemies, kind of sums it up. We're expecting Democrats to cave.
Yeah. Man. And we've been talking about this for so long. Like, okay, now's the time to not cave. Why would you cave? Why, if you say that it's an immoral bill or that, it's rotten, why vote for it?
Right. I mean, look, I respect trying to be the grown-ups in the room because
Sure.
I do think that there is that good government instinct for a lot of the Dems. A lot of them are older, and they understand that when the government shuts down, that really does affect people. National parks shut down unless Trump keeps them open like he did last time in his first term, which was just a disaster. You face problems with veterans getting services, and there's a reason why we have a federal government. So I get that, but what they're trying to shove down our throats is just part two of that awful budget bill that cut healthcare for millions, that gave tax breaks to billionaires, that will cut so much in the government that will trickle down to the state and local level. And we haven't even felt that pain yet. Plus, billions upon billions to ICE. None of that worked. None of that was good for the American public. Nothing in this current bill from Republicans is good for the American public. I mean, at some point, you would think that it would just kick in with Democratic leaders. This isn't popular. Let's not do it.
Yeah, I think, there's a sense, maybe it's muscle memory with Schumer or just some, once you've been doing a thing a long time, you say to the people coming after you, like, well, I've been doing this a while. I get how this works. But this isn't at all similar to the rest of his career. This era is singularly unique and different than all times before.
Right.
And so it requires a different kind of thinking and a different kind of strategy. And we're not getting it. This, I think also there's a tendency for Democrats at the top of, the Schumers and so on to fear that they're going to get blamed
Right.
for all the things.
Democrats are never blamed for government shutdowns. I mean,
No.
I've covered state government shutdowns. We've had federal government shutdowns. Democrats don't get blamed because people think that Democrats like government, so they're not going to do anything like that. And I don't understand. I mean, I know that Democrats are poll driven. Clearly, the polls show that they're not going to get blamed.
No. Well, and I think there's another side to this too, that while they may not get blamed for this, they do get blamed for literally everything. So why not? Why not take this chance? They're going to demonize you no matter what you do, right? If you vote for this, you lose your base. And you enact bad governance. And, my dad is a vet and relies on the VA. And last time this happened, it was a disaster. It was the wait times were out of control. And these are people whose lives really depend on these services. I think we know what the Republicans are going to do. They're going to write bad policy that is slapshod and aimed at maintaining power and funneling money upwards. The Democrats have a real chance now to lead and to actually take control of the narrative. And if they don't do it, then I don't know what to say.
I think that there is a growing sense, not just for Democrats, but if you look at independents, that things are not working under Trump. You know, the economy in particular, but just writ large. Uh, and so I feel like it's pretty easy to message why you needed to not go along with this bill and let Republicans shut the government down. Trump breaks everything.
Yes.
This is just one more example in a long line. And you know, for Democrats not to seize upon that opportunity, I mean, I think we're seeing why so many incumbents are getting challenged, especially by younger people, because
Yeah.
there's just this hunger for new leadership. And really, you know, yes, some of it is coming from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, but a lot of it is just from people who are like, the same old isn't working. You know, it may not be that I am a Bernie Sanders candidate, but I know that this incumbent is not standing up there and fighting, and we need somebody who will do that. And so I think we're only going to continue to see this. And this is, you know, for members of Congress, I think we're going to see this at the state level too, because when you're not responding to what people want, and it's not just the base, you know, it's also independents, there's going to be this hunger to have new leadership. And so we've seen in the Republican Party that they are terrified of being primaried by, you know, Donald Trump supporters. And so you've seen the so-called moderates will fold time and time again. I really do think that 2026 could be a watershed for Democrats where finally they're going to see their own incumbents wiped out in primaries if they don't start getting the message.
I mean, you know, here on Lincoln Square, we've talked to a lot of people running in primaries. It's in like, you know, I had a conversation last night with a politician in New York who's primarying an incumbent Democrat. And that race, you know, the primary isn't even until June of next year, right? And we're already kicking into gear. And it's because there's a fever. And I feel like, you know, in this chat, a lot of you are saying out there, what are we going to do? Like, can we call?
Right.
Yeah, you can call. And calls do work. But we have young candidates saying, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to run.
Yeah.
I'm going to run. And it's going to be really hard. And it's going to be an uphill battle because there's, you know, an incumbency advantage that is undeniable. But you've got to bring it to them. You got to make the incumbents who are, you know, not leading in the way that we need them to. We need to run candidates against them, even if it just wakes them up and they still win. You know?
And we've got Kathleen in our chat on Facebook, and she, you know, wants to know, well, what do we do? Yeah, and she says she's an independent. What we know what's not working. So what is working at this time? So Sam, that's probably the $1 million question that we get all the time.
Yeah.
What's working? What do we do?
I mean, Kathleen, that is, you're absolutely right. She says you cannot just wait. I'll post that one until the next election cycle, and that's exactly right. And I think that the sad and sort of frustrating truth is that there's no one single answer. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and that means no kings protests.
Right.
We had Ezra Levin on last week, and you know, he was talking about how he projects big numbers at the next No Kings, but he's also worried. He's doing that work, right? We need, if you are not a huge organizer, then you need to call. You need to make calls. You need to find your candidates who are who you believe are actually doing something to support them. Show up at your town, you know, your city hall meetings, your town meetings. Vote in your local elections. A couple of years ago, volunteered to work my local election, and it felt like it was a long day. You get there at like 5 a.m. and you leave at 10 p.m. But it felt like just this little thing, like actually taking part. So obviously watch all of Lincoln Square shows, but get out in the world and try to be that change.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
as for lawsuits, there definitely has been some success. I know at the
yes,
Supreme Court level, they have been a friend to Trump every step of the way, but a lot of cases don't make it there. And at the lower court level, there's been like a 96% rate as far as challenging a lot of his illegal executive orders and actions, from everything from trying to freeze federal funds to his immigration policy. And I really hope that this week we'll be able to have Sky Perryman back from Democracy Forward.
yes,
They're involved in just over 100 lawsuits, and they're not the only ones. We've also had on folks from the ACLU. They've been very active, and it's great to take those actions because if we can get injunctions and stop what Trump is doing in any way, that's very helpful as well. And so that's another piece of the puzzle. But it would be great if we had a system where we could call snap elections if you lose confidence, like in Britain. We don't have that system, but
no,
um, I think we have seen, ironically, with Trump getting more and more heavy handed with his actions, it's a result of the fact that he is weaker than he has ever been at any point in this presidency. And the polling reflects it. Sam, you wrote a great piece over the weekend. He's at a negative 17 approval rate. That's not just from Democrats. That's other people too who do not like the direction of this country.
yeah, it's, and Rick and Andrew Wilson talk about this a lot. We're seeing, there's the bottom basement of his support that almost feels, like a universal constant of physics, right? The 30%, 31% who will never leave him. But maybe, maybe there's 1% of those people who are starting to peel off, and we're seeing the plunge. Like he is taking a real plunge on the, which is good news to some degree. But on the flip side of that, as he plunges, his people know that he's plunging, and
Hmm.
they're more and more desperate. And so you have, events like him trying to stop the war in Portland. Um,
Yes, Sam, yes, war ravaged Portland. It's horrible. There are bike trails everywhere.
awful.
You need to look both ways before you go anywhere because those renegade cyclists are out. Great trails there, lovely gardens. I'm a big fan of Portland, but yeah, I think we should talk about this because again, I need to point out the fact that Trump has been saying, I think for about 2 months, that he's going to invade Chicago, and he still has not done it. There have been some videos of ICE on patrol, and I mean, ICE is everywhere, but he has not sent in the National Guard. Because J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, has said this is illegal. We will fight you on this. And Trump is a bully, and bullies back down when they're challenged. So he decided we'll send troops to Memphis, and now he's saying Portland. And what I find really fascinating about Portland is that this has been one of those symbols ever since the George Floyd protests for the right of this is just a liberal city gone, run amok, and there's like it's been burned to the ground. There's nothing left. And in fact, we've got a story from one of the local Portland TV stations where when Oregon's governor was challenging him and saying, we really don't need you to come in. He was like, well, but I've been told that there are fires everywhere. Like, is what I'm seeing on TV not real? And like, this was like a really interesting, I think, viewpoint into the mind of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He really does think that anything he sees on TV, which is Fox News, is reality. And you have to wonder how much of their programming is geared just towards this information loop that the president needs to sustain himself. And as we know, that's not the reality in Oregon. But this is the world he lives in. And frankly, if all you do is consume right-wing media, you probably think so too. I mean, you think that probably if you step foot in New York City or Chicago, you're going to get shot instantly. That's your perception, because that's the reality that's being reflected back at you by your news sources.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I have a couple of things to say. Remind me, Rick Wilson, I want to mention this, but the first thing is I was at the doctor a couple of years ago, and he's a little conservative, kind of, and I was like, over the weekend, I'm going to the city, to New York. We live upstate. And I have a couple of meetings, and he was like, "Are you afraid? Like, are you scared?" And I thought he was talking about COVID. And I was like, I mean, no, I'll be fine if like it's super crowded, I'll just mask. He was like, no, I'm just talking about like the murders and stuff. And I was like, New York is, I've never felt safer. I've lived in the Midwest, in small town breadbasket states. I've lived in the upper Midwest. I've never felt safer in any city anywhere other than New York. Like, New York is incredibly safe. And this doctor I was talking to actually lives, just outside of New York. And so he ought to know better. But that's the thing. This media diet is bonkers, and it makes you feel like perhaps Trump isn't just Trump. He's also a member of his own base, right? Yeah. Like, he's the guy watching Fox News, which brings me to my second point. Rick Wilson and Lincoln Project for years have done these ads called Audience of One. And the narration speaks directly to Donald Trump. It says, "Hey, Donald," right? And they figure out where he's going to be that day, and they buy the ad space on Fox News. And so he is literally seeing these ads. Mm-hmm. And generally what happens is they run the commercials over a few hours of cycling, of news cycle. And then Trump starts truthing at them. Failing Lincoln Project, this, and it's.
And he's currently threatened to sue the Lincoln Project again.
Yeah.
Over one of Rick Wilson's commentaries, which we have responded to and basically told him, "Come at us, bro."
Yeah, exactly. And think about this though. On the other hand, if you can just run an ad and provoke him like that, think about what Putin's doing. Think about the other world leaders. Right. This is who we have in the office right now.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, if you spend a lot of time arguing on social media, and I will admit that in years past, I definitely did. Not like that was my main purpose for going online, but, especially as a journalist, you post your stories, people tell you how stupid you are, and it's easy to get caught up in that kind of trap. But yeah. I think back, like, how many of the deal?
Uh-oh, Susan, you're cutting out. Oh, Susan's cutting out. I mean, I think that to extend that, oh, there you are.
I'm back. Sorry. That was a great freeze frame. I'm sure you all enjoyed that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking down and I was like, oh.
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, no, I was going to say, that I'm not sure exactly what the, overarching, where you were going to get to, but I think that trolling it can be pretty unproductive, but also very fun. And that's, it is, I don't love it. I don't love trolling at all. But that's, again, the Midwestern in me. No conflict. I don't love it. But nonetheless, that's where our politics are. And it's performative. And I think that pounding out hateful messages on social media is keeping you away from doing the real work, right? Of buying billboards to message in Republican districts, of actual outreach. We had on Mike Cortez, who's running against Andy Ogles in Tennessee. And he's, his whole thing is like, look, I go to the the houses, I knock on their doors, the ones who I know have voted Republican every cycle.
Mm.
And I say, I know you're not going to vote for me, but I just want to hear, what's concerning, what you're worried about,
Yeah.
what you want, what's happening here. And that is one of those heart messages. It is making connections.
Yeah.
You're never making a connection by trolling someone.
Yeah. And that's true. I think sometimes it's really easy on social media to just be the worst version of yourself. And, because you're not looking somebody in the eyes,
Yeah.
and you probably would say things that you wouldn't in a real conversation. And I think a lot of us are guilty of it. Certainly I have been. And I have come to the conclusion just how unhelpful all of that was, and what a weird bubble it was to be, so constantly online. So I think that there's a real lesson there for all of us, and having those personal conversations with people is just so much more valuable. And it doesn't mean that if your neighbor voted for Trump and all of a sudden you say hi to them in the morning, that you're going to have this great dialogue and maybe change their mind. But it's a much better place to start. And the person is real because they're actually there next to you instead of some programmed bot from Vladimir Putin. But over the weekend, here in Michigan, where I live, there's a really disturbing story where a Mormon church was absolutely desecrated. It was set on fire. There was a gunman who came in and fired off round after round with an automatic weapon. There are at least 4 people who are dead, and including the shooter. Another tragedy. Sadly, in America, you did have to ask, there was a mass shooting where, because there was another one in North Carolina as well. And so that's just the state of the world that we live in. But again, just like we saw with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Trump and a bunch of MAGA influencers like Benny Johnson, they took it upon themselves to use this for their agenda. And Benny Johnson's like, Christianity is under attack. And Trump said a more mild version of that. And of course, when reporters were asking the FBI agents on the ground, what do we know about the suspect? What's his ideology? They were like, we can't tell you that right now. This just happened. It's going to take a while for us to figure out the facts on the ground. Now, USA Today did do some reporting, and they did find a picture of the suspect in a Trump shirt and a Trump pen sign recently, was shown in his yard. So we do know that. But what we've seen time after time is that the facts on the ground don't really matter to a large segment of the population, to that core 30% of Trump supporters. There's so much misinformation. I'm sure if you go into the fever swamps, they've already decided that it was a trans person or it was a violent leftist. It doesn't matter who really did it. Just like with the shooting of Donald Trump, it was just a guy who is radicalized online, not for a certain ideology, but just, we live in a country where it's easy to get a gun and it's easy to fall down rabbit holes. And yet a lot of people in this country, maybe a majority, do think that it was a Democrat who shot him, because there's so much misinformation. We're just drowning in it.
Yeah, I also think, I want to tread lightly, I think, because I don't know all the facts
Right.
clearly, but I also think I've been, on boards where that are dysfunctional, where you spend the first hour of a board meeting deciding who's at fault for the current predicament, and it's unproductive.
Right.
So I see these things happen, and there's a huge rush online, and now within the party, the regime, to immediately start assessing blame. And to me, first, I think that's a waste of time. You solve problems going forward, not going backwards, right? That's just always how that works. Um, the other thing is, once you find out who's to blame, well, then what? It feels to me like the immediate attempt to assign blame to a particular group is actually what it really is an attempt to push blame off of yourself.
Right.
Right. And that's how it always is in any work meeting you've had, or anytime you get in an argument with your weird cousin about who fucked up. Really, you're not just trying to say they fucked up, you're trying to say I didn't.
Yeah.
It feels like the regime is saying, this isn't on us. In fact, it's on them. It's definitely on them. Like, this isn't the gun violence isn't our problem.
Right.
But sadly, it is. It's everyone's problem. And I think all of us in this audience ought to be really fucking tired of getting shot at every week. And to think that there's just no solution for this is un-American.
Right. And then there are solutions. It's just a solution that very, powerful groups like the NRA don't like, which is not taking away people's rights to have private gun ownership that's been litigated by the Supreme Court, but just, guns shouldn't be in the hands of domestic abusers. There should be, a waiting period, just like, it maybe 24 hours, something, not very prohibitive. You should not be able to just walk in and buy a gun at a gun show, when you have a felony record, or get it online, whatever. But, I had a great interview with Dr. Cynthia Miller Idris last week. She's a professor. Thanks.
She's the best.
She is, and she's been on before, I think, with Maya May, and she's incredible. She's a professor at American University, and her new book is Man Up, and it's talking about the growth of violent extremism and how it ties into damaging versions of masculinity. And we're talking about all of these mass shootings, and what over 90% of them have in common is that it's a male perpetrator. And, a second red flag is if they have a history of domestic violence or sexual violence. And even though this is something, if you look at the numbers, it's really obvious, there's just not a lot of attention on this, because nobody is saying, like, ban men, they're the problem. And that would be a really big overstatement of the problem. But instead of looking at what these events have in common and what are some damaging things that, might be contributing to this, instead we kind of live in this world of perception and of misinformation online. And I think probably if you did polling with people, there's no way that they would say, sure, 96% of murders are committed by men. They'd probably say half of them are committed by trans people.
Yeah. Well, they also think 30% of the population is trans, which is
right, exactly,
wildly overstated.
Yeah. And I have to admit, we try and do our part at Lincoln Square with our independent journalism. And, I hope if you can support our work and be a paid subscriber. But we're one voice out there, and there is so much misinformation. We're absolutely drowning in it. And I really feel like there is a segment of the population where they're just immune to basic facts. And you can create the world that you want by what you consume online and who you associate with. And that is a much bigger problem that we need to deal with, because, that was one of the things that Democrats have always commented on, to bring it back to what we started with, is, if we do enough good stuff, people will notice. That was kind of like the entire theory of the Biden presidency. Here, I passed the IRA, and we had this huge relief for for communities suffering from the pandemic. We put a bunch of money into infrastructure. People will notice and everything will be great. And instead, people are like, yeah, but my eggs cost a lot. So that's great that I'm not unemployed, but I can't, afford anything. And this really does seem like a sucky presidency. He and Kamala Harris paid a big price for that. So, Sam, I feel like this is something that Joe Trippi is really great at talking about, and we're going to continue to talk about this because it really shapes so much of what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I think a few years ago, right during the pandemic, a friend of mine who is, just seemed to be a normal sort of consumer of media was like, you know what? There was a hearing on ivermectin, and they think it works, but that hearing has been buried. They've erased it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm in media. Where did they show it? They were like, it was on like C-SPAN.
Mm.
So I went to C-SPAN and there it was, right? It had been buried in their social media algorithm.
Mm.
And then they saw a post that said, they're trying to hide the truth from you. And that's all it
Mhm.
took. That's all it took for her to believe in ivermectin as a serious solution, not only as a serious solution for COVID, but a solution that, they didn't want you to know about.
Yeah. And it's very seductive.
So,
I mean, who doesn't want to feel like, oh, I know something that you don't? And these awful elites, they're
yeah,
trying to keep us down
they're trying to hide it from you
with their science.
with their science. But all it took was just the slightest scratch beneath
Yeah.
the surface to say, well, here it is right here.
Yeah.
Here's the hearing. And now let's check out the experts who were on this panel. And you see it unwinds right there. And not everyone's going to do that. Almost no one's going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real problem. And it also, speaking of vax, the hollowing out of facts and messaging is spread across the government. It's not just pertaining to violence and the myth of trans shooters and all of these. It's the MMR vaccine schedule. It's this Maha bullshit. It's everything.
Yeah.
There,
It's
facts.
yes. And it's an effort for the Trump administration to try and create the reality that they want. Oh, child hunger is up. We just won't release the report on that.
Yeah.
Inflation is up. We'll bury that report too. I don't like the job numbers. I'll fire the BLS commissioner. And even though it does not jive with a lot of people's reality, it does seem to be keeping his base satisfied for now.
Yeah. Well, we've got a big week.
Yeah.
Another big week. We had Sky Perryman today, but she had to reschedule. So we're going to look to do that either later in the week or next week, probably. We have, what else do we have?
We have Spencer Kuven, who represents a number of Epstein survivors, and he will be giving us an update on what is happening with the survivors. And also, Thomas Massie looks to have gotten 218 signatures for his discharge petition to get the Epstein files released. There are a lot of indications that one of the reasons why Republicans would be happy to shut down the government would be so that does not come to the floor. So that should be a really interesting discussion with him.
Yeah, I think the big stories we're really following this week are the generals in Washington on the same day that potentially the government shuts down,
right,
due to Epstein files. It is a whopper of a week.
You're gonna definitely want to watch Anchor Watch on Tuesday night, because Bobby Jones, who's a retired Navy commander, mm-hmm. He is the right person to talk to at this moment.
When the news dropped that Hegseth had called back, by the way, Hegseth called back all the generals, and then Trump gave an interview. He was like, yeah, all generals from around the world, why wouldn't you want to have generals from other countries? Like, Trump didn't know what this meeting was. Right. And then he claimed he was going to go, and I don't know, it's going to be a shit show. But I asked Bobby, I was like, do you want to comment on it? He said, no. We'll comment on it once we have more information, because this is a really, really big deal and you
Right.
don't want to get it wrong.
Right. And we don't want to feed the misinformation loop.
No.
We try and be as responsible as we can, which is why we bring you experts like Bobby.
Yeah. Yeah. We have Cliff Cash on Punching Up, who, if you haven't seen his comedy, he's on Instagram. He's so funny and he hammers at Mike Johnson. And he's like a Southern guy. And anyway, he's very good. So that'll be a really fun show as well. Strategy session tomorrow. Man, we've got your media show on Thursday.
Yeah, with Antonia Highland from MSNBC. That'll be great.
Mm-hmm.
And then on It's the Democracy Stupid, do we have...
trying to think who we have.
Ben Collins this week?
I think that was the plan.
Okay. So Ben, we're hoping that Ben will be on this week, but he will definitely be on the show coming up. He is the CEO of The Onion, which is seemingly more realistic than what's really going on these days. But he also used to be an NBC reporter on right-wing extremism. So he has a very interesting background for these times.
Yeah. Yep. Going to be a big week. I mean, just after all this stuff, I have, behind the scenes stuff. Susan and I talk all day, every day, and you're just never prepared for what new content you have to produce so that you can cover this, this bullet train of chaos.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, it's just horrific. When you see the news of several mass shootings yesterday, you never get used to that, and we never should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Also, we'll be back with Andrew Watkins to talk more Project 2025 and the stakes. And
I'm sure she'll want to talk about Trump trying to weaponize this supposed war on Christianity that Trump and his supporters are ramping up, because that's very dangerous.
It's going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Sam,
we got work cut out. Yeah.
And thank you for all of you to join in. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate your comments as well. That's a great part of doing this show every week. And so we're looking to incorporate more of your comments, because this is a great way for us to talk with you directly.
Really collaborate. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.